So, what I'm thinking about today is the urgency or the necessitation of change, and how a lot of times, and I myself was guilty of this for a long time. People get caught up in this idea of revolution and like thinking you need to like go straight for that and like never stop pursuing it, and that's like how you become a positive force for change or whatever. There's some merit to that. I don't personally think that's like the way that we need to like focus on personally. It's definitely like maybe kind of like a last ditch thing, something you would do if you really felt like there was some kind of intensely desperate situation that couldn't be reconciled. I don't think that's the case right now. I don't think it's terribly far gone at all, really. And this is coming from someone who has spent probably more time in ratio of how long I've been alive to someone else who might have spent technically more time doing this, but I've probably spent like more time than anyone just thinking about changing the world in different ways, and how it's like all we should care about at all times. And it's a fun ideal to have, I guess, but at the same time you gotta really recognize that we're dealing with very finite circumstances here in terms of ourself, in terms of what we can actually do with the world. Like they just had this Joe Biden 10K in debt forgiveness thing going on, and like some people are very happy about this. Some people are like, Joe Biden was gonna do so much more than that. He was gonna like erase debt. I didn't mean to make this so like concrete or anything, but it's like a good notion, right? And this is kind of like the feeling I have towards revolution. Like, it's a good notion. It's something, that's maybe even positive, but at the same time, like, it's still limited to, like, the real world. It's still limited to what we're economically and materially capable of. And, in the same way you might think of, like, revolution, you'd think, we're still confined by our own ideological preferences. People are on the left, people on the right, they both want revolution for different reasons. These things are gonna run right into each other, and that's the problem.
The Democratic Party and the Republican Party was just like the old patent medicine drummer that used to come around our country. He had 2 bottles of medicine. He'd play a banjo and he'd sell 2 bottles of medicine. One of those bottles of medicine was called hypopylora. And another one of those bottles of medicine was called low papahara. Finally, somebody around there said, is there any difference in these medicines? Oh, he said, considerable. They're both good, but they're different. He said that hypopylorum is made from the bark off the tree that we take from the top down. And that low papaharum's made from the bark that we take from the root up. And the only difference that I found between the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership was that one of them was skinning from the ankle up and the other from the ear down when I got to Congress.
There's this guy named Brett Weinstein. I always quote him, or not really quote, but I approximate his ideological position, which is that the goal shouldn't be like fighting this left-right divide, which we're very caught up in on a social level. because, like, you know, you can engage other people in this way, right? It's entertaining to you to be able to address the left-right divide, because there's always going to be some people in your life or online that are going to be like left or right, whatever. But Brett Weinstein, his take is you shouldn't be focusing on that. You should be focusing on anti-authoritarianism. And you know, he's not perfect. I just, you know, I take interest in all kinds of people, and that's, I guess, kind of relevant to what I'm trying to say is, you know, on both sides of the political aisle, I think you do get people who are ignorant of certain things, yes, but you also get, I think, like a coagulation of mutually inferred good intentions, you know? Not that there's anything wrong with like having left-right based discussions, it's just you're not actually doing anything productive, to be frank. You're not. It's this crusade you're creating in your brain, and it's a schizophrenic delusion to think that you're going to have some kind of a great overcoming wherein the left or the right overcomes, and you know, you then establish utopia. That's, come on. Come on. That's not happening. I'm sorry. I hate to speak of the devil, but, you know, I follow some people on Twitter, and they, you know, they like to load it onto Donald Trump. And, you know, he is whatever to me. I don't give a shit Donald Trump. I think he's the most irrelevant person in existence to anything that's important. Like, I think as soon as you care about Donald Trump, you've lost, right? I don't think there's any ground to be gained there. He doesn't. I don't think he gives a about like what people think of him. I mean, obviously, that's what his persona is person who doesn't give a. So, I mean, that's fine. You know, you can disambiguate it all you want, but it's. I kind of feel like they do the same thing he does in a way when they're critiquing him. Like, okay, what does Donald Trump do? Basically, he's there to, like, find people who can be screwed with and, like, you know, actively try to kind of subvert their expectations. I mean, objectively, this is just what he does. I'm not saying it's good or bad. So, yeah, he focuses a lot on, like, trying to with people, trying to, like, pigeonhole people into, like, a caricature of themselves. Like, that, in simpler words, he acts towards people in a way that is reductive, right? He's a bully. So the response people have to that is they make a new caricature of him. Caricature meaning like a imagined representation. And you know, not to say he's not doing bad things. He is. He has done bad things. It's just when you try to like be like you know, Donald Trump is so evil, blah blah blah. You're kind of like saying like no one is genuine, right? Because it's a weird idea. Okay.
Ordinary people didn't identify with an ideal Trump. They perceived him as one of us precisely through his vulgarities, mistakes, and so on and so on. That's how political identification works. It's a nice paradox for Hillary. To win, she should not have played the role of the big unifier. Her coalition was absurd. Her coalition was Wall Street and Occupy Wall Street, Saudi Arabian money and LGBT and all those sexual liberation movements and so on and so on. It was a fake ideological formation. The problem with Trump is that for me, he's not simply evil. He's a brutal, manipulating pragmatic. Disgusted as I am with Donald Trump, I hope that precisely the shock of electing him will maybe trigger some restructuring of the entire political space.
Anyway, something I wanted to say was, you know, there's that thing they say when you're in school is, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And it's kind of true, in a way. Like, if all you have is the capability to detract from someone, then you're not, I don't think you're capable of doing anything positive. I mean, yeah, Donald Trump, bad guy, sure, whatever. I don't give a I just don't. I'm sorry. I can't be bothered to. He's one person, and like the more you feed into this hype he's created around himself, I think the worse it gets, you know, regardless of which side you're on, you know, conservative, Democrat. And ultimately, I just don't think he's important. I don't think politicians are important people, right? That's like the real problem. Like, we created this mythos, right, around Donald Trump as like the celebrity politician, and it's very cringe to me. Like, it's like a surrogate for like the level of engagement we should have with politicians in the first place. Because, you know, conservatives, they'll like see Donald Trump and be like, wow, he's really speaking to me where I'm at. Because that's what like a business person does when they're trying to sell you stuff, right? That's like his whole, he wrote like Art of the Deal, right? Okay. Basically, this persona he's created is personable to some people, you know. I'd say personable to even, you know, left-leaning people as well, because, you know, it takes a person who's like lovable by someone in order to be hated, you know, in a weird way. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that Trump has become the surrogate for everything that we should and need to focus on in politics. Like, all the other stuff that we could be talking about is just like empty, non-existent, doesn't seem to really come up. I mean, there's so many issues, man. I mean, immigration is still a freaking issue. I don't know why we're not still talking about that, you know, regardless of, you know, whether you think we should have more or less of it. It's still an issue. Doesn't even seem like we're talking about the thing you can't mention on YouTube, the incidents of sorts that is across the globe, right? Okay, you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, like, you should pay attention not just to, I think, what people are talking about, but like what that detracts from as well, because we always want to focus on some new thing all the time, right? We want to focus on like, you know, what's fun to talk about. And I don't want to say things shouldn't be fun to talk about, but at the same time, you gotta have recognition there, right? Like, it's a delusion to think that talking about the issues as they like to present them to us are going to result in some kind of actual systemic change. Again, you have to go to the anti-authoritarian position in like the political compass instead of going like left or right. And this has kind of always been my stance, is it's not about these arguments we have with people, and it's also not about like this kind of like death drive in a way, to just at all odds go towards like the object of whatever you feel the oppressor is, right? And like face them, and it's destructive ultimately, because we need better conversations, basically. We need conversations about things that aren't so centered on reality as it's trying to be presented to us. We need conversations that are centered on things that we actually want to do and see change in reality. You know, I look at Donald Trump, all I see is like a clown on a stage. That's all he is. And everyone's paying. It's like the jester has become the king, you know? That's a weird inversion, you know? The jester is supposed to mock the king and remind him that he's still human, right? Which I suppose is kind of like, in a way, an interesting observation, in the sense that people have like mythologized him as like some kind of particularly special, almost messianic figure. So it's like this inversion of the king who is the jester has created like some kind of weird hybrid archetype or something, that like when people see it, they'll only see like something mythological in a way, right? That's just a tendency. Like when you see one thing that sticks out among all the rest, like you want to think that that thing is special, and if that thing is also powerful, then you want to think that, wow, that thing like fits into this particular narrative I have, which you could say it's the Christian narrative. I think this is more of like a culturally ingrained thing, this like notion of needing some kind of like specific person to come and fix all the problems, like you could call it like great man theory. Like okay, Steve Jobs invented the iPhone? No, he didn't invent the iPhone. He just presented it, right? So like the purpose of a politician should not actually be, I think, to tell us like exactly how to navigate this ideological left-right divide and like find these half solutions, as it were. You know, we're always finding half solutions to problems that are chronic. They keep reiterating themselves in different ways, but we just come up with these solutions that are like very half-baked, very boring. It's like they have to embed the solutions with the level of mundanity, so that like we don't think about a better solution too hard, but we also can like kind of accept this solution temporarily. I mean, it's funny, his name is Biden. You know what bide means? It's like holding back and like restraining yourself so that you can like manage your energy level and not waste too much energy on any particular action. I think in a really weird way, Democrats wish that they had like their own Donald Trump. Like someone who could do things the way he does, but like on the other side, right? Because as it stands, like in terms of the personality foundation, or personality matrix, whatever you want to call it, when people approach Donald Trump, they're kind of just shut down for the most part, because he uses his persona as a weapon. And I used to think for a long time, like with politicians, we should like separate them from their persona as much as possible. Like we should basically just have like not even like their voice, just like a transcript of what they're talking about, or even just like their positions like lined out in a bullet point. But I think that's kind of like indicative of the whole fallacy of like our modern political apparatus, I guess, is we don't focus on like a key way to resolve like prior problems and like logically work them out. We basically create these gladiatorial stadiums in ideological sense, where like we're attached to like the success of a person because we're betting our money, in this case, you know, our like thought energy on them.
For all that we have is our perception, and whatever we perceive to be reality is in fact our reality. You want to get into quantum physics and all of that business, where we start talking about the fact that we, as observers, in fact actually manipulate and manifest reality. We are intricately and subconsciously involved with the reality process. Once we know this, we can start to see what's happening all around us. Those who are in control are using this information to manifest a reality that is most advantageous for them. They introduce a point of view which may or may not have anything to do with what is actually happening in the world, and they reinforce it with a growing opinion through media. And what's interesting is the fact that the more people who believe these lies, the more real these lies become. Opinions or ideas become reality. Something imagined actually becomes tangible. This is happening in today's world. And with our own human inclinations towards fear, the majority of what is focused on and agreed on is fear-based. And this is encouraged because when people are afraid, they can be controlled. When a human being is afraid, the sensory input and brain patterns, the breathing and physicality of the body becomes less efficient. It stops working at its peak. It begins operating poorly. And as a result, a person is making poor decisions. Decisions that can be easily influenced. They are working overtime to keep us under control because we pose a threat. We pose a threat with our minds, for we have the power to change the world, and they know this. With a vision, a focused vision, a unified vision, we can reform this world into a better place.
So yeah, I always kind of thought like it was dumb that politicians were even a thing, because they are not themselves issues, though we elect them so that they may resolve issues. And it just seems like a very circuitous, I keep using words, it seems like a very indirect process through which we resolve anything. And, you know, in a way we kind of need this, right? Because we don't really know what the best solutions are, like in a very tangible sense. Maybe we think we do, but, you know, it's more complicated than I think any particular action that, like, the left-right ideological sphere could take today. I think it really is just a matter of, like, stopping being dependent on, like, a greater force than us to think. Like, I feel like that overall is, like, the great evil of the system as a whole. Is it's just kind of stuck in terms of believing that it's going to, like, churn some, like, better person or figure or idea or solution or legislature out of this process. And again, it's delusional, especially when it means attacking each other. And you know, this stuff, it tears apart families, it tears apart friendships. I even feel like people don't want to, like, associate at all with, like, people on the other side of the political aisle, even if they themselves are kind of, like, apolitical. They kind of want to find, like, a clique, right? And I'd say that, like, it's really hard to find a clique that's totally neutral in this way. In fact, I don't think I've found any who could be defined as, like, completely bipartisan in their social existence. Like, you know, even if there's, like, fighting this way or that way, I'd say the clique itself as a whole still tends to follow a certain line of thinking. I mean, if you want to believe in the great man theory, like, you know, we need, like, specific people to do specific things, I feel like you're discounting yourself in a way. It's like it reminds me of that Sam Hyde skit that got taken down, where he was talking about being AH's right-hand man, or, like, best dude or whatever. He's a comedian, right? So the whole thing was comedic. It got taken down from YouTube, which is a shame because it was really funny, actually. So that was one of the tangents in this. It was called, like, what not to say on a first date. I think you can still find it on the internet, but
Live a la vida loca, baby! And that was the last thing he said. My father, Fred Hyde. And I was glad that I knew that we had done the right thing by pulling the plug.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, nobody really liked them all that much. It wasn't that big of a deal.
basically, the people who believed in this they put him on such a pedestal that they needed him to be better than them. He needed that they needed him to be like the best person, right? Because that was kind of like foundational to the way their beliefs work, which is that you like the best people are like the only ones who matter, which is, you know, inherent to the whole right spectromity. Spectrum? I don't know what I'm saying anymore. The whole right ideological faction is about like elitism, right? Even economically, it's about like enabling people who are already rich to do like better contributive things to the economy. And so like the whole foundation of this ideology is based around other people are going to bring about like the advancement we need. And I don't like this. I really don't like this idea at all. Like, just broad scope, I hate it. I feel like with the internet, there's no longer this problem where like you need a specific leader who's gonna like organize everything, because like in the past you kind of did need that, right? There wasn't like this vast communicative network that we have now that makes it like so easy to express ideas. So I feel like this whole like politician, great leader theory is like it's kind of lost its charm, because you once had like these great army generals and people who were like philosopher kings and whatever. It's so freaking stupid to have right now when you can literally just be talking to anyone in the world immediately. But it's like, we gatekeep people, right? Like, if someone's famous, we make it very difficult to get their time and attention and all that. Not that there's even anything necessarily wrong with that specifically. I mean, people want to spend their time efficiently. I guess I just kind of feel overall like politicians are disingenuous and everyone knows it, but because we want our side to win, we don't actually do anything about it. We basically just prop up the system more. But yeah, I think when it comes to like Democrats in particular, they have kind of like, I almost want to say like a Stockholm syndrome, right? Because they've got these politicians who are supposed to be representing democracy, right? But do we have democracy? No, we don't have democracy. We don't have anything. We don't have anything close to democracy. Not right now.
The key principle of ancient Greek democracy was, firstly, that everyone could participate and vote on major issues in a democratic assembly. The next principle was you didn't have an elected government. The town council, they called it the boule, the town council was selected by a random sampling of the entire citizen population. And the next point was that in the courts, there were no judges. The courts were run by the juries. There was no judge making a decision. Advocates would address the jury, and the jury was sovereign. That there was no aristocracy forming a judiciary. The ancient Democrats believed that if you voted on someone else, you would always end up electing people from the upper classes. Ordinary people wouldn't get into power. Now, you look at any assembly nowadays, look at the statistical composition of that assembly. Is it representative of the population, or is it representative of the rich and the educated? You don't even have to think about it for a moment to see what it is. The way we understand democracy is actually largely driven from America, but it's really the political system of slavery. It is a series of institutions which were designed to ensure that the slave-owning class dominated the constitution. They deliberately didn't choose the Athenian model. So what ended up is that the Americans defined themselves as the model of democracy. And the model of democracy was electing a Senate. It wasn't having representatives chosen randomly, as the Athenians did. The point about election, that any state which has elections is actually an aristocratic state. It's always the landowning aristocracy or the rich who end up dominating a Senate. You're not ruling yourselves.
We basically have a very long, winding authoritarianism that sometimes will throw on the brakes in response to the complaints of the people. Like that's about it. That's democracy. So what does a democratic politician represent? It represents like a failed attempt at like what should be. So like you have this great man who is the politician, who is like a democratic politician, and it's an oxymoron, right? A democratic politician, like, democracy did not have politicians, like, by definition. It had just like people who would like talk. That's pretty much it. Like, people would just, like, freaking voice their issues in a public forum, fairly randomly, in fact, literally randomly, I believe. And it wasn't meant to be this whole, like, electoral process. It was meant to be, like, a very organic kind of setting, whereby you would just talk about shit that was bothering you, and, like, try to figure it out, like, among your peers, and, like, a dialogue, or just like a, it's kind of like a Discord server, really. I mean, you know, anyone can talk, but you know, it'd be like small, right? Because if you have too many people, everyone gets lost in the sea of faces, right? So that can be very disappointing. I just don't think it makes sense anymore. I feel like we need to, like, de-stratify the concentrations of power that exist. We need to make it so that the people who are on top are not, like, so hard to reach. Not just in terms of, like, actually talking to them, but also in terms of, like, being on the same plane of ideology and being able to have, like, a good one-on-one conversation with them. Like, there's this one dude on YouTube, it's called Vosh, and I'm not gonna say anything about him, but he does one thing right, for sure, and that is he gets a lot of people on his show to just, like, talk to him randomly, one-on-one, face-to-face, and they're not always, like, famous people either. They could just be, like, call-ins, basically. In fact, they literally are call-ins sometimes. But I think this is a good model, right? So even though he's, like, a famous person, he's still, like, basically reachable. Like, you can email this dude and he'll probably reply at some point. Which, you know, even, like, smaller creators than him will make it, like, harder to reach them. Just kind of sad. I think there's a lot to be gained from speaking to one's audience. And, you know, I'm speaking about this in third person. Obviously, I do it. I'm doing it, like, all the time lately. I guess I should reiterate, like, if you like to talk about these things, that's fine. But this is, like, the same thing I say about, like, a lot of intellectual stuff is, it's not some kind of, like, crusade to fix the world, even if you're imagining it that way. It's just a hobby. It's something you do for fun. You're not actually solving any problems that exist in the real world for the most part. I mean, you know, occasionally you have some eureka moment, but it's not like these two opposing forces are going to either give way to each other to pave a new path for a cultural upheaval. It's, I mean, that's like the Tim Pool idea, which is just not, like, totally ungrounded. It's just, I don't think it's, like, realistic to how things actually happen, like, when things happen in the real world. I think it's just so heavily mythologized, like, it's like a true myth, you know? In the same way, like, religion can be considered, like, a literal metaphor or something. I mean, some of those things, like, did happen, some of them probably made up to a degree, but regardless, it's a kind of metaphor for something like a underlying narrative that we're trying to bring resolution to, because we don't have the facility to see into the future. So we just kind of assume, hey, it's like this other thing that happened in the past. It's like the fall of Rome or whatever, or it's like freaking Star Wars. I don't know, whatever the hell you think it is. It's a myth you're using to equate the state of reality to something you're familiarized with. It's like House of Cards, right? They lean against each other, and that's how it's like propping itself up. So to beat the system, you don't lean into each other harder. Well, hopefully you don't fall the other way. I mean, you don't want to like give allowance to the other side, but at the same time, you know, if like, you know, the right falls that way or the left falls that way, it's like they're still falling. They're both falling because they're codependent. And like, if you simply allow one side to collapse, the whole system collapses. Basically what I'm saying is tribalism is a delusion. Thinking your side is the side that's going to overcome via force is delusion. We need to not be like this. We need to at least pretend to care about each other. And, you know, maybe Donald Trump is just a catalyst in this, and he's going to show us through his own failings that we can stop being so hard on each other. I mean, I wish. I mean, if you want to take that really weird QAnon stance and believe that he's like the one who's gonna like usher in some kind of better world, maybe it's not by his hand, but by his own, by his foot. He's gonna like trip, and in tripping and falling, he's going to make us realize that the whole thing is a freaking act, that we're just giving away all our energy for free, and we shouldn't be doing that. This video is sponsored by Snickers, which is unironically the best way to deal with sudden hunger. Good stuff.